Well, Nick, everyone thought Adam Bandt was pretty safe as well. I don't know, maybe he should have hosted less dance parties and occasionally made an appearance in his electorate.
Look, I'm trying, Rita, to show the necessary compassion that one should also always show to somebody who loses their job suddenly. But I'm struggling, I have to admit it. It's a terrific move. And I will just give a shout out to Advance. They did play a major role behind the scenes in this whole exercise, and they haven't got the credit. Advance, if you remember, was, of course, a big player too in the voice debate. They are really become a very powerful force for good in the political debate. Much as Get Up used to be on the other side, but where's Get Up now? I mean, I hear they're really on the ropes and possibly going to fold. So it's great. It's great to see the people on the Conservative centre-right do something really well in this space, because we need that uplift, don't we, after this rather dismal campaign.
Yeah.
Well, Advance are clever in how they do things. They have limited resources, it seems, but they get maximum bang for their buck. We saw it during the Voice campaign. We saw it with their social media work during this campaign. Of course, their target was primarily to get the Greens. The Greens have been plunged into crisis mode, with the party blaming Liberal and One Nation preferences for losing their leader, instead of, taking a moment to reflect on their missteps. One Labor source said of Adam Bandt and his party, it turns out being morally superior has a shelf life. He'll blame Labor, he'll blame the Liberals, he'll blame voters, but he'll never blame himself. That quote given to the Australian newspaper. Gary, the Australian is reporting that Larissa Waters, the Senate leader, the South Australian Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, they're the two front runners to be the new leader. Also, Mehreen Faruqi is in the running.
Oh, boy, if she's the answer, how stupid's the question? Look, I would reckon Larissa Waters is probably most likely out of Queensland. She's been around a lot and she's won her return for 6 more years in the Senate. But that's it. They're gone from the House. They're of absolutely no use to anybody when it comes to the Labor Party government. And I think that's probably, to be fair, a good thing, that the Labor Party can govern in their own right. Everything is their own goal or otherwise. But in the Senate, different matter. And the Greens will try and tear them further to the left. We'll probably see more taxes on super, unrealised capital gains tax, taxes on housing, all those things the Greens have been hoping and are wishing for years, because the Labor left, which is half the caucus, is going to go mad during this term. Albo says he's going to govern for all Australians, but only if the left and his party room lets him. And that's going to be the problem, because the Labor Party is fundamentally attached to the idea of redistribution of wealth, taxing people who lift and giving it to people who lean. And that is your problem. They're going to run out of other people's money at some stage. So, you know, my grandchildren, I've got a couple of them, another one soon to arrive, they're going to be asking me years from now, what'd you do, Granddad? Well, I've had a go. I spoke to Rita Panahi. I was with Nick Cater. I've had a try. But their children and maybe their children's children are still going to be paying off the debt that's going to be clocked up over the next 3 years, thanks to the Labor left.
Nick, he makes an excellent point there, does Gary. The Greens are probably going to have the balance of power in the Senate, and if Labor opts to deal with them as opposed to the other crossbenchers or doing deals with the coalition, we may have a government that is even more radically left than the one we've seen in the last 3 years.
Yeah, this is a symbolic victory in the lower house, of course, with the size of the majority that Anthony Albanese is going to have. You know, Adam Bandt and his chums would have been twiddling their fingers really in there. The real work will be done in the upper house, where, as you say, they've got the balance of power. So Labor will be inclined to move further to the radical left. And don't forget, there's a lot of people within their own party, within their own backbench now, who really should be in the Green Party, but I guess they wanted to be in Labor because they got more chance of actually being in government. So that's something to watch out for. But I would give some free advice to Larissa Waters. I assume, like the rest of us, she never misses an episode of your show, Rita. But my advice is this: get back to the tree hugging. You know, I mean, I don't think I ever saw eye to eye with the Greens, but they were a much nicer bunch when they're actually trying to save nature, which we'd all like to do, and do it without fear or favour. So when they're bulldozing bits of native forest to put up, you know, wind farms, you should be out on the streets. You should be out lining in front of the bulldozers for that. Let's see this old-style Bob Brown. I never thought I'd be yearning for the return of Bob Brown, but please, that's where they should be going.
Oh, yes, we miss Bob Brown these days. Now, the Senate battle for Tasmania's 2 remaining seats is heating up. Jackie Lambie and Lee Hanson, that's Pauline Hanson's daughter, Lee Hanson, among the 4 remaining candidates. 2 seats have already gone to Labor, 1 to the Liberals and 1 to the Greens. Amid the Senate battle, Pauline Hanson has hit out at Lambie, saying that she votes with the Greens or the Labor Party and she doesn't have any idea about the policies. Nick, I'll start with you. Jackie Lambie has provided me with plenty of content, particularly for lefties losing it, but will she be much of a loss if she doesn't make it?
It should be a loss to your show, Rita, but not to the Parliament. In fact, and I don't know Pauline's daughter at all, but I just take it that if she's a chip off the old block, I think I'd rather have her. It's nice to see Pauline Hanson. She's behaving like a soccer mum, isn't she? She's sort of, you know, like you go to these kids' soccer games and the parents are yelling from the touchlines. It seems to me what she's doing here, but good on her, and good on her daughter for having the courage to stand, and good on the Tasmanian people for recognising somebody who will really represent their interests as opposed to somebody who votes with Labor, Greens, whoever, and just looks always rather wild and angry.
And just makes some of the most demented comments I have heard. Remember when she wanted to lock up Elon Musk for having free speech on X? I mean, incredible antics. Gary, you've got to say about Tasmania, though. I mean, they're an example of why the Senate is called unrepresentative swill, as Paul Keating said some years ago.
Yeah, well, he did say it, and I get what he says, but look, that's the deal. We've signed up. Our Constitution says first states, the 6 first ones onto the Constitution, all got 12 senators. Well, originally it was 10. So, you know, I also would quote what Graham Richardson observed, and I'm sure I'm not misreading or misrepresenting Richo. He was concerned when Labor brought in extra senators for each state by increasing the size of the House of Representatives in 1984. He said, we're going to rue the day. We're going to end up with some crazy people in the Senate. Now, you know, make of that what you like, but we're going to end up with a few interesting results. And so one of the best things that could be done if we were serious about what was good for Australia is to actually reform the Parliament. Fewer members in the House, drive down the numbers in the Senate, actually have fewer senators, and that way you needed a bigger chunk of vote to get elected. You'd be more mainstream automatically, and you wouldn't have some of the kind of, well, entertaining for the Rita Panahi show kind of contributions from some people in the Senate. Just saying. But look, I'm not rewriting the Electoral Act right now, but if they want me to, I could bring in first past the post voting, make it non-compulsory voting. These sorts of things I think are all part of the reform, but winners are never going to change the system that got them across the line.
Absolutely. Those last 2 suggestions, I think, are very sensible indeed. First past the post and make it optional. Why should you be forced to vote with the threat of a fine? Now, I want to bring to your attention a couple of pieces in the Australian newspaper and see where you stand on this debate. Paul Kelly has argued in his column that the Liberals must return to the Howard concept of the broad church in order to win. He writes that its revival is the only viable strategy because it opens the lens wide, it is inclusive, it incorporates both the Liberal and Conservative traditions, it offers a broad basis for public policy and a welcoming window for a wide range of Australians. It would open the party to the country, not shut its doors. Nick, is that a little bit naive? Hasn't the political landscape changed markedly since those Howard years? You could argue one of the Liberals' biggest issues is an identity crisis where they try to be all things to all people.
I suppose I'm going to side with Paul on this. The thing is, Rita, we have a Westminster system. Westminster systems work a lot better when you have two major parties and people join those parties with different views and they argue the toss within them. I am all for the broad church, but on this condition, that everybody who wants to be in that broad church, number one, has to subscribe to liberal values, and number two, has to want the party to win the next election. Because I sense there are people on the so-called moderate fringe of the party who sometimes look to me as if they don't want the party to win, and they'll sabotage it at every opportunity. And that's what's going on right at the moment over this, this unseemly battle over the leadership, which I mean, just have that discussion respectfully behind closed doors, because the longer this goes on, the more vicious it is. And there's some horrible, horrible stuff being thrown around to Angus Taylor, completely unwarranted. But so long as this goes on, Rita, the longer it'll be before the party ever has a chance of getting back into government. And I personally support the Liberal Party because I think they're better in government than Labor, full stop. And I don't want to see them in opposition a day longer than they have to be.
Well, you say you disagree with my take, but what you're arguing for is, I think, some sense of uniformity within the party. Obviously, you're going to have people with different passions, different points of view. But if they have to subscribe to the Liberal position and they have to be disciplined and loyal, then that is very different to the sort of broad church we have seen in recent years, where there is the infighting, the moderates trying to get rid of the Conservatives, the white-anting that's happened. And I've got to say, this piece by Janet Albrechtsen in The Australian is, I think, far more sensible advice. She argues that without a firm foundation of values, a political party is just a house of cards, and that instead of the Liberal Party running from the culture wars, they need to embrace them. She writes, everything is about culture. What kind of country do you want to be? If Liberals don't start embracing that, explaining policies through the prism of what kind of culture we want, they may as well fold their tent and save donors a heck of a lot of money. Gary, how do you see it? What is the path forward for the Liberals? How can they become electable again after this catastrophic result?
They've got to stand for stuff or they'll fall for everything. And look, I understand Nick's point, and I also understand Paul Kelly's point. And in theory, the concept of the broad church is okay. But my caveats are this. You've got to have purpose. You've got to have passion. You've got to have vision. You've got to be authentic. And so they can have a broad range of personalities, a broad range of policies, positions, and I guess a broad range of, moderate to more conservative views exercised. But in the end, you've got to actually galvanise all of that for a purpose. And the purpose has to be Australia. And so the Liberal Party desperately needs that kind of strength of leadership. When Sir Robert Menzies was around, the leadership was against the extreme left, the communists. He took all of that on. I remember reading Jim Killen's first speech in early 1956. I wasn't around, but I read it years later, where he was talking about the fight between mainland China and free China, Taiwan and China. He was right onto the whole kind of threat of the Reds that were coming for us, the way that society would change. John Howard equally also galvanised Australians for a purpose. So a broad church got behind a leader, and that's what we need. We need to have a strength of leadership, authenticity, values-based, to Janet Albrechtsen's excellent point, values-based, and to own the Australianisms associated with everything. Stop the world trying to interfere with us. Make Australia for Australia. Make it great again. Can I say that? I mean, you can do it. Why are we getting so scared at every first bit of criticism from the left?
Well, this seems to be the problem. They're so terrified of some sort of media backlash from people who will never back them in the activist class, academia. And they're scared to actually have an authentic, principled, strong position that is dramatically different to Labor. And we saw that at this election. We saw them go with this small target strategy. It was a disaster, and yet you've got all these hacks in the media telling them to do more of that, to veer even more to the left, to try to appeal to voters who are never going to back them. Exactly. Gentlemen, Gary Hartgrave, Nick Cater, thanks for your time tonight.